Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to the Popternative podcast, the podcast and talk show where we have digital discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, TV, sports, lifestyle, music, everything really depending on the guest. We talk about it all. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On social media, you know me as PD Beats. Of course, we're keeping up with the tradition where we have our yearly NHL Draft special, because the 2020 NHL Draft, it will be on Tuesday. It will be a virtual draft. And as always, every year, we are joined by TSN's amateur director of scouting, Craig Button. Craig, welcome back to the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
Obviously, with unprecedented times with COVID, I mean, the landscape of this draft is literally like never seen before. This is going to be a virtual draft, and a lot of players and coaches and stakeholders have to adapt to this different landscape. It's also pushed back.
Well, I mean, here we are. It's October, and we're talking about the NHL draft. But I mean, like everything else that's happened in our world since COVID-19 presented itself and reared its ugly head, you know, we've all had to adjust. We've all had to adapt, and it's no different for the NHL. And you know, hopefully this is the last time we have to do a virtual draft. But I think that when you look at what the NHL was able to accomplish with the return to play and the presentation of the Stanley Cup to the Tampa Bay Lightning, you know, like you have ideas, you collaborate, you try to work through those ideas, and then you execute them. And it'll be different for all the players, absolutely. But it'll be something that when we look back on this in a year or 2 years or whatever the time frame is, we'll see it for what it was. It was very unique, but more importantly, Peter, we'll see it for the way everybody did adapt and everybody did collaborate to try to, you know, affect things that are part of everyday life as best as they could.
I know. And, you know, talking to a lot of the players too, I mean, their training, their peak kind of training and preparation for the draft was when kind of the peak of this pandemic, you know what I mean? Like right when it started, like it just kind of, I think it threw off a lot of people. So yeah, October comes around. This is the draft. I've talked to you about this. We've been following these players for quite some time. I mean, I know there's a lot of hypotheticals and there's a lot of optics because it's kind of hard because you don't know. It's not fair to say whether a player is going to pan out or not. But I mean, this is a draft that a superstar could be drafted in the second round. I look at the top 60 players in this draft, and there's skill and there's speed and there's dynamic, and there are players that could be game breakers that could be drafted in the second round. What do you think about that, Craig?
No, well, okay, so let's go back to the 2007 draft, right? So do you remember who was picked first in the 2007 draft? Patrick Kane of the Chicago Blackhawks. Yeah. Okay. Do you know who the second best player in that draft was?
Who would you say?
It's Jamie Benn.
Jamie Benn, yep.
Who was picked in the fifth round. So I all I'm doing, Peter, is illustrating your point. Right? That's all I'm doing. I'm illustrating your point. I mean, we can look back and we can find lots of players that turned out to be stars, not drafted in the first round. And, you know, there's so much development ahead of these young guys. You know, from the time they're drafted to the time they're playing in the National Hockey League. Even Nathan MacKinnon, who was the first overall pick in 2013. I mean, he was a highly touted, deservedly so player. But it took even him some time to move to superstar status in the National Hockey League, you know? So, you know, whether you're the first overall pick, whether you're a fifth round pick like Jamie Benn, you know, there is a time frame for these players to grow and to, you know, mature into what they're going to be. And, you know, for the NHL scouts, you gotta say, wait a second here. That 18-year-old player is the guy that's going to be a star, right? It's, you know, it's a difficult job, but it's a job that everybody embraces and understands, you know, what they're trying to do and also what the challenges are within it.
We're going to get into specific players and kind of, you know, where you think certain teams can kind of go. Before that, I mean, I've asked you this before as well. I mean, there's either, drafting, the best player available, or there's drafting for need. I mean, I know it depends on the team, but for you specifically, what's your kind of perspective on that? Do you take the best player available, or do you always have to go to the needs? Being a former GM in the National Hockey League, I mean, is it kind of depends on the situation you're currently in?
Yeah, I don't think it's black and white, Peter. I mean, if you're trying to use the draft to address some of your immediate needs, it's not gonna happen.
No.
Because you're dealing with 17 and 18-year-old players in the vast majority of cases. So, but if you're looking at your prospect cupboard and you're trying to assess, okay, we could use a few more defensemen in the pipeline, or we could use a few more forwards or a goaltender. Well, that's the point in time where you can say, okay, we need to stock those shelves. But you never stock your shelves at the expense of drafting somebody you think is a better player.
Yeah.
So you're always dealing at any point in the draft with a group of players. That's what you're dealing with. Whether it be, you're picking 15, you're considering 3 or 4 players, you're picking in the second round, so you go through the evaluation and you assess what the player is and but ultimately it comes down to what do you want, what do you like, and then draft them. Because it's the player that you're most comfortable drafting at that point in time. And you've put in all the work, you've done all the assessments, and that ultimately is what it comes down to. So, just get good players. That's what I feel. Just get good players. Now, in the case, and if it's close, and I look at a franchise, for example, let's look at the Ottawa Senators. If you look at the Ottawa Senators and they're picking 3 and 5, and you're looking at a group of players, well, there's defensemen, there's wingers, there's a goaltender if you want. But when I look at their team and I say, okay, they could really benefit from a top-end center. So everything being equal, I wouldn't take a center in that spot if I thought there was 4 better wingers and a defenseman in there. But if there is a center that fits in with that group that you think is right there in that group, and you feel that that's something you can add to, I take the center. Mm-hmm. So that's an example, I think, of what you're trying to do with respect to selecting need over best player. Never ever take a need over players in a group that are better.
No, absolutely. It's always exciting because, you like from also the fans' perspective, kind of seeing the routes the NHL teams take, and then, depending on who they take, it kind of rings bells in your ears of what the strategies are in place or what they were trying to do. You know what I mean? So basically, we've been talking about players for, the last couple of months. You have like the top 10 and everything, but then sometimes, the bottom half of the top 30 for the first round kind of changes sometimes. Who have you have in terms of not necessarily sleepers, but players that you think could maybe have a chance of kind of cracking in that first round of the National Hockey League draft that are not maybe spoken about as much, Craig?
Well, Peter, one of the things that you always have to look at is, the difference between the 25th pick and the 35th pick really is negligible. I look at 21 to 40, 45, whatever. They're all the same group of players. Yep. You hear this all the time. We talk about NHL teams. An NHL team, oh, geez, we couldn't believe he was there at 37th. What they're really telling you is that they had him rated much higher. And perhaps if they were picking 23, they would have taken exactly that player. Yep. Right. So we get to the top end of the draft, and you can really define, okay, this is the group of players that are in there. After that group becomes wider and wider. Not significantly wider, and I'm not talking 40. I'm talking, but there is a pretty good span there with respect to what ends up unfolding. But when you start to look at the draft and you start to consider, players like that, like I don't know if Jeremy Poirier is going to be a first round draft pick. I think he should be, but when I watch Jeremy play, and you consider how he plays the game with that fantastic skating and that real jump into the offensive attack. I mean, there's a player that if he's not drafted in the first round, we haven't heard a lot about Jeremy Poirier, but he's a really, really good player. And when you're looking for the attributes that translate to the National Hockey League in a significant way, Jeremy has them. He reminds me a lot of Nate Schmidt, who plays for the Vegas Golden Knights, and and Nate was a free agent. There's another example. How about a free agent that signs as not just even a later round draft pick? Jan Mysak, who came over from the Czech Republic right after the World Junior, played in Hamilton. Another really good player, and perhaps he goes in the first round, perhaps he doesn't. But you watch and you watch and you watch, and you think to yourself, boy, this is a really good player. Now, one of two things happens. Either he's being underrated because you haven't given him his just due, or there's lots of really good players deep into this draft. I take the second view, that there's lots of good players in this draft. I mean, Thomas Bordeleau, playing with the National Team Development Program. The more I've looked at it, the more I've watched him in obviously in video, and I've seen him. I saw him lots over the last few years. I mean, there's another player that I think has a real chance to be a good player. Sam Colangelo with the Chicago Steel, Luke Evangelista. You start going through these players, and what I keep coming back to isn't are they going to be first round picks or not? I just look at them and go, I think they're really good players. Yeah. And I'm going to do a final list on Monday, Peter. A final list.
List.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's not
the calm before the storm, eh?
Yeah,
right before Tuesday.
There's not a lot of movement. It's more for my own satisfaction and to put some players, into some spots that I feel more comfortable with. And I would never have. But if the draft was in June, I would have been evaluating the draft and looking at that draft list anyway. So really, this is just a continuation of that. But I just see lots of really good players available in this draft. And, I think, are they all going to be first-round draft picks? No. Is every first-round draft pick going to have the success that the team that drafted them thought they'd have? No. And we're going to have sleepers, so-called those players that come out of – I mean, you told me that one of the players that's going to show up in pre-draft interviews is Igor Sokolov. Well, Igor is 20 years old, but – when I look at the qualities he has, I've been asked this, who do you think could play in the National Hockey League next year? Sokolov is one of the players I've said because he's 20, he's big, and he brings an element to the game that everybody needs, goal scoring.
And you know what? Another thing, too, is, two traditions on our show. We have you for the NHL Draft. We have you also for the World Juniors. The interview I did of Igor is not released yet, but I've already interviewed him. And he says that he honestly thinks that the World Juniors that he played in made him a better player. He said that. He thinks he showed up back to Cape Breton. He's like, I got 12 goals in 4 games. He's like, I was a different player after that tournament.
Well, so think about that. Think about the tournament, and you're playing in your age group, right? So you get to measure yourself against the best players in your age group, and Igor was really good, and that builds confidence. So I'm just talking like he's got a great skill, and that's goal scoring. And so, you look at it we focus in on Alexis Lafreniere because we should, because he's really, really good, right? yeah. But there's other players in this draft that are really good now and are gonna come not out of the woodwork for you and not out of the woodwork for scouts, but they're going to show a lot of people in time how good they are.
Absolutely. So give us a little bit of very quick before we wrap up, top 5 in terms of where you think the teams will go in terms of the top 5. And then obviously because we are Canadian, if you can, give us a little bit kind of snapshot where you think the other kind of Canadian teams do you think are going to go with their picks?
Well, I mean, I do a mock draft on TSN, and really it's a lot of fun. We do a lot. We have a lot of fun with it. We consider, where players are within the range that team is picking, and then we try to say, okay, this player would be a fit. It's plausible for them to look at it. We look at those. We look at the prospect cupboards. We open up the cupboard and we look on the shelves and we say, hey, they could use this. And, we have a lot of fun with it. I'd like to tell you that I know who the teams are taking. I don't know. That's not my job to know. But I do know this, is that all I want to do is just try to make sure that it's plausible. So at number 3, Tim Stützle to the Ottawa Center. I mean, the guy's brilliant. I think he's just a star.
People were saying they're not sure the Byfield or Stützle 2 or 3. They're not sure because it can go either or.
Okay, so when we go to when you hear the term,
I was just saying. No.
I'm asking you this question, But I think Byfield's going too. So if Byfield's not available, you can't take him.
No, exactly. No. I was just commenting.
No. I know you are. No. I'm just saying. So let me ask you this. I'm going to go back to something we talked about a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. So when you hear the term "take best player available," right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're picking 2. Who's the best player available? You know what? You don't know.
Quinn Byfield, the center.
No, that's who you think the best player
Tim
is.
Tim Stützle, I would say.
But nobody knows. Yeah. Nobody knows.
Tim Stützle is the best player after Lafreniere in the draft, in my opinion.
But everybody talks about best player available. Remember, best player available is what you think is the best, right? Not these other things. I always go back to this because it's a real fallacy. Oh, just take the best player available. Tell me who the best player available is. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the 2017 draft. Okay, let's have some fun. You're the Dallas Stars picking 3, okay? Mm-hmm. And your choices are Miro Heiskanen, Cale Makar, or Elias Pettersson. Go ahead. Tell me who the best player available is.
I think they're pretty happy with Miro.
But do you see my point, though?
No, absolutely.
Okay, so you're in a group, right? You're in a group. They could have taken any one of those 3 players. They would not have gone wrong. You got Miro, who's outstanding. You got Cale Makar, right shot defenseman. You got a star center in Pettersson. My point about best player available, and it's not to you, it's one that I've been taught because people, just take best player available. Just, okay, great. Tell me who it is then. Unless your name's Mayor Lemieux or Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid, when it becomes clear, it's a group. Anyway, I think Stützle's like Patrick Kane. Yep. I think he's fantastic. At 5, I love Marco Rossi. In our mock draft, we had them taking Lucas Raymond. More as I thought about it, I said that they have Josh Norris in the system, who I think is going to be a good second line center. So add another top line winger, and Lucas Raymond reminds me of Mitch Marner. Yeah. So let's go down a little bit. Let's go down to 10, and Winnipeg will be picking 10. And I think Seth Jarvis is a Braden Point clone. And second line center playing behind Scheifele, not a bad little fit. Mm-hmm. We get into 14, and that's the Edmonton Oilers. And your buddy is the guy I think would be a great fit, Jack Quinn from the Ottawa 60. I think he's the best goal scorer in the draft. Now, if you're able to draft the best goal scorer in the draft, and you can play him alongside Draisaitl or McDavid, how good could the best goal scorer be with 2 of the best players in the entire planet? Yeah, pretty good, right? 15, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Braden Schneider from the Brandon Wheat Kings. He's a big, strong Jacob Trouba type defenseman. And by the way, isn't that what Toronto's been talking about? A right shot defenseman for forever and a day.
Seems like it, yeah.
Yeah, Montreal at 16, Dawson Mercer. He had 2 goals on Friday night on the opener in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. He and Hendrix Lapierre. There's a lot of scouts up in Chicoutimi. I don't know if you're aware of that, Peter. On Friday night, October 2nd, the opener. A lot of scouts up in Chicoutimi getting one last look at Hendrix Lapierre, Dawson Mercer, and Maverick Bourque was playing for Shawinigan in that game. Lapierre had 2 goals and 2 assists, and Dawson Mercer had 2 goals. So, it'll be interesting. So I just see him as a really good, strong forward. And Montreal could use offense. They could use a little more size. At 19, we had Justin Barron going to the Calgary Flames. I'm not so sure that that's the case. We looked at it as a right shot defenseman, and they could use one. But seems to me that he was a nice choice, But there could be other choices that could fit in there. And then Ottawa, let's finish it off with Ottawa at 28 with the Islanders pick in the Jean-Gabriel Pageau trade. Any number of players, right? But we had them taking another German. JJ Peterka, yeah. So anyway, that's how we went through it. We had a lot of fun. We had Askarov going to Nashville at 11. I think he's a franchise goaltender. His numbers in the KHL, but everybody talks about wild cards. All I know is when I watch the game, and when goaltending's really good, we talk about it. And when goaltending's really bad, we talk about it.
But
so
like
you better get a goaltender.
His World Junior performance wasn't very great, and people are kind of honing in on that. Can you tell people not to hone in on that, Craig? Because it's irritating me.
Okay, good. Okay, so if you're irritated, right, I will help you because I just sit in amazement. When I think about Askarov, one tournament, like Carey Price in 2005.
But you see it. People are like, "Oh, he was bad in the World Juniors." Come on.
Yeah, who's they?
On
they?
The internet. You know what I mean?
No, but I mean, when I say they, I mean it's people that aren't confident in their evaluations. Right. It happens at the NHL level too. Yeah. This isn't about they. I'm not trying to pick it out, but this is what happens in scouting, and you can't go into a scouting season or into scenarios talking about, well, he played good, therefore he's good, or he played bad, therefore he's bad. Like, that's not how scouting works. No. And, if you take that approach, your mistakes are going to be numerous and they're going to be continuous. So you can't do that. You got to do it over time. Mm-hmm. But Carey Price in 2005, and the reason I bring up Carey Price is that I think Askarov is the best goaltender entering a draft since Carey Price in 2005. Yep. At the under-18 tournament in April 2005, Carey Price wasn't very good. Yeah. He went 5th. How's he turned out? Right? But that's what happens, Peter. Askarov has played 3 games in the KHL this year. 3 with Ska. He's 18 years old. Mm-hmm. He's given up 2 goals. He has a .974 save percentage in those 3 games.
He is a phenomenal goaltender. And anyone that's why I think he'll go high. I think he's going to go high. I think because, like you said, it's rare to get the goaltenders at his level in the draft. I think he's going to go high. You're going to see. I think he will go in the top 10.
But Ottawa take him at 5. If you're Ottawa, let me ask you this, Peter. You're Ottawa. You know the players and you know the teams. I shouldn't ask the question in that way. What I should ask you is in this way. You're Ottawa. You take Stützle at 3. Mm-hmm. Would you have Askarov in consideration at 5? Mm-hmm. And I would too.
Absolutely. Craig, this is a tradition on the show. We do it every year. Thank you so much for coming back on Popternative for the NHL Draft Special.
Is that all you have for me? I thought you had some tough questions, you said.
No, but just more like usually we just get into the players. I kind of want to know about like best player available. I kind of not really tough, but I kind of had like
some different questions.
Different questions.
Okay.
I'll throw one hard question at you. Do you want a hard question before we end?
Well, let's go.
You look at a lot of teams that have a pick in the top 5 draft. Do you think that this is such a and you look at teams that have multiple picks in the top 10, like Ottawa? Do you think you keep the players, or if there's a good do you look at it and say you keep those players, you drop those players, or depending what the market is for a trade, do you trade it? Because I don't feel like this is the draft where you would trade, in my opinion. I think you draft and then you kind of see how these players go because you have a nice crop of players.
I agree with that, Peter, because 2 things. You don't know when the NHL is going to play again, right? Yeah. And so here we are. The draft is in October. It's been pushed back, right? So what happens if you're only playing, post January 15th? Yeah. I've seen a lot of players take tremendous strides in the time from when they're drafted in June. They come back and play the first half of the season, and you're watching them at the World Junior go, oh boy, that player might be challenging for a spot on this NHL team the next year, right? So compressed schedule too. The other thing too, compressed schedule is that, teams are the potential of a compressed schedule in the NHL, right? Like, Yeah, you might want some older players. You might want some more experienced players. But ultimately, if you don't have young players to come into your lineup, you're going to run up against it. So what I would say is, to your point, with the uncertainty around the beginning of the next NHL season, just stock those prospect shelves.
Draft.
Yep, I'm with you. Well, look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. They didn't trade their top picks. They went and made their picks, and whether it be Vasilevsky or Hedman, Stamkos went 1 and Hedman went 2, but they made those picks, right? And and then when it became time to consider trading those picks, it was about really strengthening their team. And that's what they did. And ultimately, they won.
Absolutely. So, Craig, at this rate, no one is going to dethrone you as being on the show the most. I hope you know this.
Really?
I don't think anyone will. We're consistent with, people love this. People love these specials. The World Junior special around Christmas is one of the talk of the town in the Popternative family.
Well, can I tell you what? We're going to have to think about how we're going to do the World Junior this year, because but that's the next big event. In hockey, it's going to be the next big event. So, we got to do a series. We can't just do one special. We're going to have to do a series leading up to it.
Yes.
To the World Junior, because all eyes are going to be on this tournament, and I think we have a great opportunity to do something that not only would be fun for the fans, but will win you awards for your
absolutely. We've
do.
been also trying to, our schedules are very busy, but we definitely need to do one where it's me and you, and we have some prospects on with us and chatting. We've tried to do it, and it will happen. But I think that would be a great dynamic as well.
Oh, for sure. Well, we're gonna have the time, so we got to make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, seriously, thank you so much again, Craig. This was awesome.
Yeah, it always is, Peter. I always love joining you.
Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. And until next time, this is Craig Button and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.